For thousands of years, the few have used knowledge as power to control the many and profit from their ignorance. Over hundreds of generations, the masses have outsourced their thinking and unquestioningly consumed products of deception. Today, as a result, the non-elected rulers continue to persuade us to adopt their limited perspectives. This series resurrects your curiosity and broadens your awareness so you can learn how to read between the lies. This is what you've been missing.
The goal of this series is to provide you with the tools to understand the world in which we all live, so we can learn to survive and thrive in life. Greetings and welcome. I'm your host, Richard Grove, and I'd like to begin by employing metaphor, using this box to represent the status quo, so as to illustrate that this series was created to present you with the myriad of media which describes the world from the outside of this box, whereupon we criticize and review it, like this. What you've been missing is an educational exploration designed to stimulate you and your potential, to resurrect your curiosity, and to inspire you to think critically so your decision-making and realization of enjoyment in life goes off the charts. Submitted for your approval. This is the episode pilot of What You've Been Missing, titled Exposing the Noble Lie. We've got a lot to catch up on, and here's why. Our research over the past 7 years has uncovered the following 3 facts. 1, that the systematic form of critical thinking upon which the Western world was built was taken out of our education system in the 19th century. 2, as a consequence of our education system being censored, those of us born in the 20th century were easily shaped, conditioned, and manipulated by sophisticated forms of propaganda and public relations, leaving us in a world based on illusions of knowledge and not actually knowledge itself. And 3, as a consequence of points 1 and 2, those of us inhabiting the 21st century are faced with problems that seem to be unsolvable and pressures and responsibilities for which we are not educated to be successful at resolving.
There is a curse on mankind. It is a curse so well known that we never talk about it, we never discuss it. It is a curse that says that you and yours will never rise. Your grandchildren are serfs, their grandchildren will be serfs. You are a shoemaker, your grandchildren will be shoemakers. And my heel will always be on your neck. Until America said, now wait a minute. If you're lucky, if you've got guts, if you can take the crap that life throws at you, if you can get here, you might rise.
Hey, Mr. Pants. Come on in, Mr. Pants. Pants.
It's hard to say why that particular bullet was shot, but yeah, it's a neighborhood where a lot of things are changing, where a lot of people are upset, where people have been pushed out of their homes by real estate value, not being able to pay the taxes, whatever else. You know, I've tried to think about it. I've tried to think about if I were out there and someone else were in here, what would cause me to be resentful or envious.
The south side of Chicago is one of the poorest inner-city communities in America. But now rich people are moving in and creating some serious changes in the neighborhood.
What used to be housing projects are suddenly condos, and you wonder what impact you're having on the city and who lives here, who can afford to live here. Three big tools have been used in a lot of areas. First, you build a big police station. Secondly, you tear out all the basketball courts. And lastly, if there's a local public school that poor people attend, you tear down the school.
This land is worth more than what the niggas over here can give them. So What can you do with them? Displace them, and the ones that you don't want over here, you get rid of them. You get rid of them. You know, and what you use as an excuse, use the drug dealers, use the cocaine house. This is my son. Come here. This is my son.
Do you feel like your kids have an opportunity to get rich in this country?
Hell no. They ain't no rappers. My kids ain't gonna be rappers. They ain't gonna be rich.
It's easier to just cleanse the earth of these people, send them to the far reaches of the universe, and the mayor's office will build a big police station, build a bunch of townhouses, the yuppies will buy in and bourgeoify it, and suddenly we'll have a community. Yeah, there'll be a bunch of people displaced. Yeah, there'll be a bunch of crime problems, but it's easier. We found the easy solution.
Charles Darwin did not invent the term survival of the fittest. That was Herbert Spencer, a social Darwinist who thought that if we just allowed the rich to get richer, that was good for society because we want to discourage the poor from having a lot of children and basically surviving. That kind of social Darwinist notion has stayed alive in certain quarters, and I believe that it is there behind much of the economic policies we are now seeing.
This is Erica Goldson, and unlike the valedictorian of your high school class, she's got something to say which I think you should hear.
Hey, this is Erica Goldson.
No, I just said that. Play the part where she proves that she's outgrown her provisional self-esteem.
I have no clue about what I want to do with my life. I have no interest because I saw every subject as a study, as work, and I excelled at every subject just for the purpose of excelling and not learning. And quite frankly, I'm very scared. John Taylor Gatto, a retired school teacher and activist critical of compulsory schooling, asserts, "We could encourage the best qualities of youthfulness, curiosity, adventure, resilience, the capacity for surprising insight simply by being more flexible about time, texts, and tests, by introducing kids into truly competent adults, and by giving each student what autonomy he or she needs in order to take a risk every now and then." But we don't do that. Between these cinder block walls, we are all expected to be the same. We are trained to ace every standardized test, and those who deviate and see light through a different lens are worthless to the scheme of public education, and therefore viewed with contempt. H.L. Mencken wrote in the American Mercury for April 1924 that the aim of public education is not to fill the young of the species with knowledge and awaken their intelligence. Nothing could be further from the truth. The aim is simply to reduce as many individuals as possible to the same safe level, to breed and train a standardized citizenry, to put down dissent and originality. That is the aim in the United States. To illustrate this idea, doesn't it perturb you to learn about the idea of critical thinking? Is there really such a thing as uncritically thinking? To think is to process information in order to form an opinion. But if we are not critical when processing this information, are we really thinking? Or are we mindlessly accepting other opinions as truth? I must retrain myself and constantly remember how insane this ostensibly sane place really is. And now here I am in a world guided by fear, a world suppressing the uniqueness that lies inside each of us, a world where we can either acquiesce to the inhuman nonsense of corporatism and materialism or insist on change. We are not enlivened by an educational system that clandestinely sets us up for jobs that could be automated, for work that need not be done, for enslavement without fervency for meaningful achievement. We have no choices in life when money is our motivational force. Our motivational force ought to be passion, but this is lost from the moment we step into a system that trains us rather than inspires us. We are more than robotic bookshelves, conditioned to blurt out facts we were taught in school. We are all very special. Every human on this planet is very special. So aren't we all deserving of something better? Of using our minds for innovation rather than memorization, for creativity rather than futile activity, for rumination rather than stagnation? We are not here to get a degree to then get a job so we can consume industry-approved placation after placation. There is more and more still. The saddest part is that the majority of students don't have the opportunity to reflect as I did. The majority of students are put through the same brainwashing techniques in order to create a complacent labor force working in the interests of large corporations and secretive government. And worst of all, they are completely unaware of it. I will never be able to turn back these 18 years. I can't run away to another country with a different education system, perhaps meant to enlighten rather than condition. This part of my life is over, and I want to make sure that no other child will have his or her potential suppressed by powers meant to exploit and control.
It's as if she's describing, what's that phrase?
What we've got here is failure to communicate.
It would then appear that to solve the problems that we all face as human beings, we need to do some learning, communicating, and collaborating. So let's start to figure out how we can apply our minds and a systematic form of critical thinking to start solving our problems so that we can have less of this.
Depopulation should be the highest priority of foreign policy towards the Third World. Henry Kissinger, 1974.
It's the need for a new world order.
And more of this.
From the time of the cavemen all the way until today, humanity continues to exist because each generation of people has produced another generation to replace itself. Scientists have figured out how many people need to be born each generation to replace the generation before. That number is 1 person per person. All things being equal, this creates perfect demographic balance. Since women are the only ones who can have children, replacing every person on Earth means each woman needs to have 2 children, one to replace her, and the other to replace the man, who cannot have children. The total fertility rate is the average number of children each woman in a society is having. This number shows us if a society is growing or shrinking. In developed countries, the replacement rate birth rate is 2.1 children per woman. This will keep the population stable, but even that is assuming that every woman has children, and that there are no wars, famines, or disease. In the real world, disasters happen all the time, and sadly not all children reach adulthood, especially in poor countries. This pushes their replacement rate up to 3.3 children per woman. Since not every woman wants to have children, in order to keep the population stable, some women need to have more than 2.1 children to balance the birth rate with the women who are only having 1 or no children at all. Maintaining this balance is of the utmost importance. If society does not at least replace itself every generation, human numbers begin to fall exponentially. Economic and social problems appear as elderly people retiring begin to outnumber young people entering the workplace. This is already happening all over the developed world. Many of the world's nations are only barely replacing themselves, while a growing majority have birth rates below replacement, some as low as 1.8 or even 1.2 babies per woman. Many societies are facing a very real danger: extinction.
But it's more of a balance of things. What, like food, some part of the world there's wastage of food, and in some parts, nobody has food. That kind of a balance, if that is solved, I don't think we would be worried so much about overpopulation.
I think it's a bit of a joke the way people have made this overpopulation thing into a kind of myth. I don't really believe it, I think whatever happens will balance itself out and work itself out. It's all right for us all living saying, oh, well, there's enough of us, so we won't have any more. Don't let anybody else live. I don't believe in that. I think we've got enough food and money to feed everybody. And I think the natural balance, even though old people will last longer, I'm sure there's enough room for us, and some of them can go to the moon anyway.
You mean you think there's enough if it were
I don't believe overpopulation, I think that's just a kind of myth that the government has thrown out to keep your mind off Vietnam and Ireland and all the important subjects.
Oh, I think you're wrong about that.
Oh, I don't care.
Yeah.
Gee, from looking at this 1962 Newsweek magazine, it looks as if population has been, for decades, a chosen way to frame out other problems. Maybe we can learn our way forward.
3-month gestation. The only real solution many planners feel is birth control, which former UNESCO director Sir Julian Huxley calls a prerequisite for anything that you can call progress and advance in human evolution. If overpopulation is not the problem, then maybe climate change is where we should be focusing all of our attention, because I could have sworn that I heard Bill Gates commingling these ideas of overpopulation and climate change somewhere.
The quest of the billionaire elites to control society and to kill off those who are not part of their bloodlines continues to the present day, with the Rockefeller Foundation having worked with the UN Development Program, the World Bank, and the WHO to develop an abortifacient vaccine that laced tetanus toxoids with human gonadotrophin hormone, causing pregnant women who took the vaccine to spontaneously abort. The vaccines were given to women in Thailand, the Philippines, Nicaragua, Mexico, and Africa, with women only finding out what had been done to them when independent organizations had paid out of their own pockets to test the vaccines and discover the HCG hormones. Now, a newer generation of billionaires are practicing using their wealth toward continuing the work of the older billionaire eugenicists.
This equation has four factors, a little bit of multiplication. So you've got a thing on the left, CO2, that you want to get to zero, and that's going to be based on the number of people, the services each person's using on average, the energy on average for each service, and the CO2 being put out per unit of energy. So let's look at each one of these and see how we can get this down to zero. Probably one of these numbers is going to have to get pretty near to zero. Now that's back from high school algebra, but let's take a look. First, we've got population. The world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
Look for absolutely none of this context to be reported in the breathless news accounts extolling the noblesse oblige of the billionaires who are generously donating their wealth toward directing our society in the direction they wish, just as it was only noted in passing that the original Rockefeller-hosted Super Friends dinner that gave rise to the Billionaire Pledge concluded that the most pressing issue facing the world is reducing the population.
Wait a minute, how are we going to lower population, assuming Mr. Gates is correct about the need to do such things? And how are we going to do it through improved healthcare, vaccinations, and birth control?
According to believers in overpopulation, there are so many of us on the planet that food production cannot possibly keep up. However, according to both the UN's Food and Agricultural Organization and the World Food Program, there is currently enough food on the planet for everyone to be well fed. Not only that, but we're growing this food on less land than we did in the past. This is why in the United States, for example, the government can afford to pay farmers not to grow food, but instead return their farmlands to the wild. Modern technology also allows us to grow food on land where it would have been impossible to do so, even a few years ago. Agricultural experts even believe that Africa, if cultivated using modern farming methods, could eventually feed the whole world, all by itself. Then why are people in many parts of the world starving? The World Food Program lists key causes of hunger, and overpopulation is not on that list. War, one of the leading causes of world hunger, destroys crops and disrupts relief efforts. Widespread poverty prevents many from buying the food that they need. And a lack of infrastructure means that there isn't a reliable way to transport food to areas that need it. This is why reducing the number of hungry people will not make the remaining people less hungry. Those who have access to the food will continue to have access to it, and those who don't will still be hungry. Reducing population will not magically cause food to be spread around equally. And blaming overpopulation for everything does nothing but distract us from the real problems that we actually have. Think about it.
So the root cause of world starvation seems to be greed, and the wealth gap seems to build up this perception of authority and superiority among the few as they fleece the many. Why is greed so popular?
Greed is good.
I have been spending 3 years at Oxford University. I am trying to learn how to teach a curriculum that I don't invent. It's 3,500 years old. It teaches reason, logic, clarity of thought, raising up of the values of dissent and debate and civility, and the skeptical, questioning talent to ask questions of our information industry. If it is a fair question to ask, how much of the English-speaking news industry is owned by one person? And if that answer is anywhere between 30 and 55%, and it is it a fair question, and is it a fair discussion? Rupert Murdoch and two other guys own everything you hear and see, and their interests may not be your interests.
Wow, okay. Let's go back to the beginning of that Trust the Billionaires clip and see what we missed, because if you're interested in seeing this clip or any of the other clips we use in their entirety, including the references, the further reading, and a community of people like you trying to dissolve the noble lie, there's a link in the episode notes for Tragedy and Hope online community, as well as comprehensive listing of the contents of this show at tragedyandhope.com/WYBM. Now here's James Corbis with some more of that in-depth analysis on Trust the Billionaires.
It was reported last week that 40 billionaires have signed a giving pledge to give 50% of their wealth to good causes in what is being called a remarkable act of noblesse oblige. Coverage of the pledge, which we are told was spearheaded by Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, and includes such billionaires as George Lucas, Barron Hilton, and Larry Ellison, assumed that the genesis of the idea came at a secretive meeting of billionaires hosted by David Rockefeller at Rockefeller University last year, a meeting that received a substantial amount of press coverage that reported absolutely nothing of substance.
Behind closed doors on this New York campus, a secret gathering of some of the world's most powerful people. Gates, Buffett, Bloomberg, Winfrey. It was like the Super Friends.
In the great hall of the Justice League, there are assembled the world's 4 greatest heroes.
Together with others at the meeting, including George Soros, Ted Turner, David Rockefeller, they're worth more than $125 billion.
To have been in the room and see this meeting of the minds really would have been a fascinating thing.
That much money, that much power around one table. It begs the question, what were they doing? What were they scheming? Total world domination?
This group, together for 6 hours, was talking about charity, education, emergency relief, global health.
All my friends are philanthropic. Well, they probably wouldn't be my friends.
What such reporting fails to take into account are any of the actual facts about these people, their histories, or what their family fortunes have specifically gone towards funding in the past. 2 of the names specifically mentioned in the reports about the billionaire pledge are John D. Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie, the world's first billionaire and the owner of the world's first billion-dollar company, respectively. John D. Rockefeller and his son founded the Rockefeller Foundation in 1913. They funded the Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory in the early 1900s, which housed the Eugenics Record Office in America and was the main American institution funding research into eugenics, the master race ideology that certain humans are inherently superior due to their genetics. They established the Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research, where Rockefeller money went to support researchers like Alexis Carrel, who advocated the use of poison gas to rid the planet of useless eaters, Hideo Noguchi, who discovered the agent of syphilis by injecting orphans with syphilis without their consent, and Cornelius Rhodes, a researcher for the Rockefeller Institute in Puerto Rico, who wrote a letter in 1932 asserting that, quote, "The Puerto Ricans are beyond doubt the dirtiest, laziest, most degenerate and thievish race of men ever inhabiting this sphere. What the island needs is not public health work, but a tidal wave of something to totally exterminate the population. It might then be livable. I have done my best to further the process of extermination by killing off 8 and transplanting cancer into several more," end quote. The Rockefellers also funded the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Eugenics, which was instrumental in developing the eugenicist policies of the Nazi regime in Germany. The Rockefellers even funded the very program that Joseph Mengele worked in before he went to Auschwitz.
Several prominent families are responsible for funding and promoting eugenics in America, namely the Rockefeller, Carnegie, Harriman, and Osborne families. 2 families, the Rockefellers and the Osbornes, are particularly significant. John D. Rockefeller Sr. contributed a large amount of money to build the Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory in the early 1900s, which housed the Eugenics Records Office from 1910 to 1944. Rockefeller influence also spread overseas to Germany, where the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Psychiatry and the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Eugenics, Anthropology, and Human Heredity resided. Much of the money used to run these facilities came directly from Rockefeller. These institutes became centers for Nazi eugenics programs during the reign of Adolf Hitler. In 1932, the Third International Eugenics Conference was held in New York City. The conference was hosted by Henry Fairfield Osborne. It was during this conference that an honored guest from Germany attended. Ernst Rudin was elected by the conference attendees as president of the International Federation of Eugenics Organizations. Rudin went on to craft the policies that governed Adolf Hitler's genocide programs at the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute.
In the wake of World War II, when the extent of the Nazi atrocities was finally revealed, the Rockefellers helped to continue the eugenics agenda by converting the American Eugenics Society into the Rockefeller-founded Population Council. The Carnegie family has also been instrumental in using their billions to change society for the worse under the protective banner of philanthropy.
So this attitude of superiority has its roots in ancient times and has persisted for thousands of years until now. So let's take a peek into how Hollywood represents the roots of our Western world.
We Greeks are the chosen, the elect. Our culture is the best. Our civilization the best. Our men the best.
Now watch.
All others are barbarians, and it is our moral duty to conquer them, enslave them, and if necessary, destroy them. Wonders are many, but none is more wonderful than man himself. The Persian way of life has the seed of death and fear in it. The Greek of life and courage. The gods of the Greeks are made in the image of man, not men with birds' heads and bulls with lions' heads, but men who can be understood and felt.
Thus beneath great-hearted Achilles his whole hooved horses trampled corpses and shields together, and with blood all the axletree below was sprinkled, for blood drops from the horses' hooves splashed them, and blood drops from the tires of the wheels, for the son of Peleus pressed on to winning glory, flecking with gore his irresistible hands.
Interestingly enough, Alexander the Great later wrote a letter back to his teacher Aristotle, and to employ a paraphrased summary, Alexander is angered with Aristotle printing books which allow basically anyone who can read to discover and learn how to use words to control others, or protect themselves from being controlled by others, both of which Alexander was concerned about. Specifically, it reads like this.
Alexander to Aristotle. Greeting. You've not done well to publish your books on oral doctrine. What is there now that we excel others in? If those things which we have been particularly instructed in be laid open to all. For my part, I assure you, I'd rather excel others in the knowledge of what is excellent than in the extent of my power and dominion. Farewell. Alexander is frustrated by his teacher giving away the tools to persuade, to coerce, and control others. If not for that power, Alexander would have to rely on the use of force to coerce others to do his will. He's also concerned that people will be insulated from his persuasive rhetoric and appeals to emotion of their emotions and actions. But the point is this. There's a concept in ancient Greece known as the noble lie, which uses words to trick you out of your liberty, to prevent you from making informed decisions, and the noble lie denies you any ability to pursue and attain your happiness. Before Aristotle, Plato had used the allegory of the cave to describe those who believe the noble lie.
Whatever you think of Plato's quest for permanent answers, nobody denies the power of the Republic's most famous story, the allegory of the cave. Imagine that this is the only world you have ever known. For as long as you can remember, you have been chained here in this cave, watching the shadows dance on the wall in front of you. Unable to even turn around, you have no idea that they are merely reflections cast by the outside world. You believe they are all there is to life. This is your reality. Then, one day, a prisoner breaks loose. Drawn to the light, he is almost blinded by his first sight of the sun. But little by little, he is able to open his eyes and see the world beyond the cave.
We are prisoners right now. We are now in the middle of a cave. Don't think of a dark room in which we are all tied up. This is the cave. The freest moments that we have for Plato are moments of imprisonment or moments of slavery.
We all begin in some sense as prisoners of our culture or our religion or our civilization. We're given answers to the most fundamental questions. What is love? What's a good family? Who is God?
Nowadays, the currently fashionable, conventional philosophy that's taught in our schools is something called pragmatism. The idea being that we just simply can't really transcend our own time and culture, that we have to just deal with the world that's given to us. Now, Plato would say that means just rearranging the shadows on the walls of our cave.
One of the tasks with the Republic is to bring people out of the cave where they're not looking at shadows, but looking at the real thing, out into the sun. If there's a cave today and shadows that people are looking at, it is the sort of darkened living room at 4 in the afternoon with those images flickering across the screen, miseducating the young.
Are his fellow prisoners thrilled to learn that the real world is out there? Not exactly. Plato ends the story by saying that they would tear the enlightened one limb from limb if they could break their chains. He has challenged everything they believe in. Of course, once you have seen the light, it is hard to go back. As Socrates discovered, it is a lonely job being the bearer of new ideas.
This is a message to the future, a message to free humanity, that we don't let our species be destroyed, that we don't let ourselves become dehumanized. It is the greatest crime in history that the establishment, that the social engineers are dumbing us down by design, that they are nurturing and funding and activating and promoting all of the most base instincts and things that are destructive, so that we can be basically damaged goods that they can control and use as their biological androids, as their slaves. We have been destroyed by our own prosperity. We have become anesthetized by all the entertainment and the food and the drugs. We have to rediscover the fact that this is a human experience, a struggle by our species to survive and to grow and to become even greater. That's what it is to be a human. And when you look at the beauty around you, when you realize just how good and special life is, when you appreciate it, then you will be fulfilled. The Western world is crumbling because we are individually crumbling on the inside, because we've bought in to the propaganda of Madison Avenue, because we have let the controllers of our society misdirect our basic human drive and instinct to love and to fight and to be passionate and real. In the global controllers' quest to domesticate and dumb us down so they can control and dominate the future, they have damaged the human species. They have misdirected our prime directive to grow and to build and to search and to trailblaze and explore. But the minute you start exploring and creating and loving life is the minute that the pendulum begins to swing from tyranny and dehumanization towards liberty.
A long, long time ago, in a federation of city-states known as ancient Greece, a literate person named Plato wrote a book titled The Republic, wherein he elaborated upon an idea translated as the magnificent myth, which is known to us as the noble lie. To define this concept, in politics, a noble lie is a myth or untruth told by an elite to maintain social harmony or the social position of that elite. A noble lie, although it may benefit all parties, is different from a white lie since it doesn't cause discord when uncovered, whereas noble lies are usually of such a nature that they do.
$10 billion in a single quarter from what they call trading and principal investments. So what does that mean? Well, basically, when our country crashed financially a year ago, Goldman Sachs used all the taxpayer money they were given to buy up all sorts of properties and investments. And now that the economy is recovering, Goldman Sachs is getting rich on the back of the American taxpayer. Since last October, Goldman Sachs has received from the government, that's you hardworking American, thank you, presto, $10 billion from the TARP, presto, $11 billion from the Fed, poof, $30 billion from the FDIC, and yes, kazam, $13 billion from AIG. That, a total of, yes, $70 billion US. Pretty good, right?
A lot of money.
Yeah. Here's where the magic comes in. You can see the market sort of marching along and goes in the gutter here. You see that?
Yep.
At the point that the market goes in the gutter last fall, we give Goldman Sachs $70 billion, as we just described. Yeah? Mm-hmm. They take that money and begin acquiring assets at a time when no one else in the world has any money. Imagine, if you would, that you are on your block, and how many houses are on your block?
I'd say 10.
10 houses on your block. Now imagine that every house on your block collapsed in value and was suddenly only worth 10 cents on the dollar because there was a great financial panic and a great real estate panic on your block.
I have to imagine.
It happened, right? Now imagine that you went to the taxpayer and they gave you, Alex Witt, because you're Goldman Sachs, $70 billion, and you were able to go and buy every house on your block for 10 cents. Make sense? In other words, they came into this distressed asset pool using taxpayer money when every other bank had collapsed.
Bought things cheap.
Bought everything on the cheap.
Okay.
Then, and they bought it, which is fine, other than the fact they bought it with our taxpayer money with which they would have otherwise been bankrupt. In other words, Goldman Sachs doesn't exist without taxpayer help. Period.
Yeah.
But because we actually allow them to continue to exist, and we supply them with all this money, they take the money and buy all these assets. Then, we, by way of the Federal Reserve and the Treasury, and a variety of other vehicles, put $23.7 trillion US dollars underneath the entire U.S. economy. And in the process, we have reinflated the stock market, we have reinflated a variety of asset classes, except for the difference this time is Goldman Sachs now owns everything because they were the only ones with the money. It's not everything, but they own a lot more than they otherwise would have, and it's simply become worth a lot more. The tragedy here and the crime is that they never gave us an interest in that money. We gave them $70 billion, and they have all the money and all the
So
power.
it stayed all within Goldman Sachs.
You got it.
Well, it's a curious kind of underdoggery where they complain about liberal bias in the media one moment and then brag about their cable dominance the next. Now, to a dumb foreigner like me, all the Fox anchors look like characters in some 80s frat house comedy.
Oh, wait, Dave.
The disapproving high school principal would have to be Bill O'Reilly, moralising about permissive society one minute.
The Woodstock generation thought it was cool to get stoned.
And chortling about lady bumps the next.
Their pitch is beach-friendly, if you know what I mean, and we believe they are patriots.
When there's no tits to dribble over, Bill kills time by boasting about his ratings.
Judging from our enormous ratings, I think we've been successful in doing that.
Or plugging his myriad books.
I do want to thank you all for keeping Bold fresh on the bestseller list for more than 6 months.
Or simply sitting there pulling a face like a tortoise that's learned to enjoy the stink of its own farts. But his primary characteristic is anger. Bill gets wound up by virtually anything to the left of Mussolini, hectoring and yowling like a wolf that's got his nuts caught on a coat hanger.
See, I'm more angry about it than you are.
So what about George Bush?
What about George Bush? He had nothing to do with it.
Although he's clearly not quite as furious as he used to be around 20 years ago when he was presenting a show called Inside Edition, which has become famous thanks to this notoriously unhinged outtake.
Yeah, I can't read it. There's no words on it. There's no words there. To play us out. What does that mean? To play us out?
Sting is going to do. It's a video. Sting video.
What is?
For credits.
I don't know what that means. To play us out. What does that mean? To end the show?
Yeah.
All right, go.
In 5, 4, 3.
That's tomorrow, and that is it.
Again. 5, 4.
He looks psychotic.
That's tomorrow, and that is it for us today. And we will leave you with a. I can't do it.
God, he needs a.
We'll do it live.
This guy needs a goddamn blowjob.
No.
We'll do it live. Fuck it. Do it live. I'll write it, and we'll do it live. Fucking thing sucks.
In 5, 4, 3.
That's tomorrow, and that is it for us today. I'm Bill O'Reilly. Thanks again for watching. We'll leave you with Sting and a cut off his new album. Take it away.
That was fantastic, Bill. Real professionalism, real comfortable viewing, really warm, really connecting with the viewer there.
Still, if you think Bill O'Reilly's outrageous, you haven't seen anything yet.
This is recent Fox signing Glenn Beck, who at first glance looks like a welcoming, happy kind of chap. He effectively presents his commentary show in the style of a wacky neighbour from a bad sitcom. Although, actually, rather than a sitcom, this is more like an out-and-out variety show, replete with zany chuckles.
You think that ain't gonna happen?
Anyway, so far you're probably thinking, okay, it's extremely right-wing, but it's fairly sane. Yes, because Beck isn't just the face of news, he's a bona fide social crusader who started his own post-apocalyptic sounding 9/12 project aimed at bringing the nation together in a spirit of unity and hope and something and stuff.
This is the 9/12 Project. Are you ready to be that person that you were that day after 9/11 on 9/12? I told you for weeks, you're not alone.
Now, I don't know if you've seen the superb and prophetic movie Network, in which Peter Finch played a news anchor who loses his mind and becomes a ranting, raving, rating smash after sinister bosses leave him on air.
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!
This is basically like that, but crazier, and starring Paul Giamatti in a blonde wig.
The real power to change America's course still resides with you. You are the secret. You're the answer. I'm sorry. I just love my country, and I fear for it.
You just go wait for these beats right now.
So once it gets rolling.
You can just look at me. That's good. Instant sadness.
It seems like they'll show you anything on TV to keep from showing you reality. And if we look at this 2,500-year-old concept of the noble lie, it's the root cause which creates the wealth gap, since it's based on a lie or censorship, and it's therefore synonymous with the information gap. George Orwell once wrote that the most powerful form of lie is the omission, and it's the duty of the historian to help make sure that these lies do not creep into the history. The gap in which wealth starts is with the lie, with the holding of information or the obfuscation of truth. This is the foundation of their concept of profit and usury. However, if we redefine profit as to any increase in satisfaction that is obtained without the use of force or coercion, then we can gain wealth, and a wealth of perspective. When you are denied full disclosure, you're being purposely deceived to subvert your sovereignty of judgment, and thus your choice, which is literally the definition of undermining your free will. And the entire status quo process depends on us making poor decisions due to our belief in the various forms of the noble lie. And I say, don't give the pricks a satisfaction. If the noble lie has been used for thousands of years effectively, and it appears to be, among other things, at the root of this myth of world starvation due to a lack of resources, it's only because the noble lie acts as a veil for greed. And I think it's time to lift that veil. Joining me to build out the context of this situation is Paul Verge in Vancouver, bringing you more of what you've been missing.
Thanks, Rich. The term status quo is derived from Latin, literally meaning the state in which, or in modern parlance, to embody the idea of the current or existing state of affairs. Now, beyond defining the status quo, we need to identify how it works and what's beneficial and or detrimental about it, so we can decide for ourselves what we'd like to preserve and what we'd like to change and evolve through intelligent observation.
Well, I thought that taking our mind off of television might be a good way to start learning how we can outgrow the status quo. Recognizing, for instance, the degeneration of our state of education, we might observe that we've all been systematically dumbed down, literally programmed to make bad decisions.
Well, the status quo is a prolific example of our common ground. Did you ever notice that our common ground is being poisoned and wonder why human beings are the only life form to create toxic pollution for profit? Did you ever ask yourself why this is, or who benefits from it? Have you ever realized that our excess of toxic pollution and frivolous use of natural resources might just have something to do with the problems we're all facing, represented by the status quo? See, we're all human beings trying to survive, and this series is about tuning out our trivial differences and tuning in to our tremendous similarities. For instance, whether we like it or not, we are, in one way or another, one of the 6 billion consumers on this planet. And it's about time that we all recognize that there's a multi-billion-dollar industry specifically designed to exploit consumers by manipulating, deceiving, and conditioning us to outsource our decision-making because it's profitable to them, the controllers of this propaganda. You and I find ourselves in a world with responsibilities for which we are not trained. The reason why our educations are censored is so that others can benefit from our folly.
Well, I agree.
Only through the power of mass persuasion, propaganda, marketing, and advertising could human beings be convinced that it is in our best interest to create disposable technology, planned obsolescence, and toxic pollution for the short-term motive of immediate profit. So here's a critical thinking question. If you realize that our present-day status quo was in direct conflict with the needs for human survival, what would you do to learn to outgrow the status quo?
Well, I'd take a few steps toward reprioritizing my time, like this. I try to divide my time working into 3 categories so I can get through a systematic process of creation. I invest 1/3 of my time into research and study, 1/3 of my time into collaboration with my colleagues, and 1/3 of my time invested into production, which is a form of expression which makes you want to learn more, share more, and do more. So here's an example how you can start to integrate learning into your daily routine.
What does Plato's Republic have to say about drugs, if that's not a loaded question?
It actually, surprisingly, has quite a few things to say, either directly or indirectly. The famous noble lie, which is in, I think, again, that's in Book 9, where essentially Plato says, we're going to need a special drug to, like, basically put over the rule of philosophy on these people, and basically says this, this drug will be a noble lie that we will tell, and we can only entrust this noble lie to what he literally calls moral physicians of the soul, and so on. Which again I found very fascinating. I mean, that the crux of justifying philosophic power at its heart is yet another instance of the pharmakon. And that, of course, leads into many of the chapters of my book, because pharmakon is not a word that can be translated in a single way, or even, in the famous, binary remedy poison.
In listening to the Gnostic Media podcast a few weeks ago, I noticed something, and then I researched it, whereupon I collaborated with my friends, and now the expression of that process of learning is this pilot episode. So let's get Jan on the line and see if we can get some more value out of what you've been missing. Jan, thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule. I was hoping you could help us understand the concept of fallacies.
The fallacies are a systematic form of deception using words, which is why it is so empowering to learn the various fallacies. It's like a virus scanner for your mind, allowing you to read between the lines.
So if literacy is a form of slavery until critical thinking is exercised by the reader, we also have to become familiar with these fallacies and to protect ourselves.
Exactly, Rich, but there's more to it than that. And in addition to identifying fallacies, you also need to be able to identify contradictory arguments which violate logic.
Now that we're aware of fallacies, it's all about learning how to spot them when it's revealed to you through corporate media, meant to change your behavior using less than factual means.
Unless, Rich, you want to be incompetent your whole life, it's a very good idea to have a system that will help you survive and thrive in this world. And I recommend your viewers read a study from Cornell University's Dr. David Dunning, which is Why People Fail to Recognize Their Own Incompetence.
Really? That sounds interesting. And it's probably a good idea to start to learn to recognize our own incompetence and how to learn for ourselves beyond that point. Jan, could you explain to me the different forms of self-learning, namely the autodidactic and the autodialectic learning processes?
Well, autodidactic is teaching yourself, and autodialectic is asking the right questions to learn things yourself.
So we've all got some learning to do in order to perform intellectual self-defense, including getting familiar with this list of fallacies to protect ourselves. Well, lastly, now that we're aware of the fallacies and the different types of learning that are out there, we need to reignite our curiosity and thus our self-learning patterns. In one word, could you explain how we lost this curiosity which leads us out of the dark?
In a single word, sure. Liberal.
Excuse me?
Liberal.
Where's that word come from?
Liberal is derived from the Latin word liber, which at that time represented both book and freedom.
So they understood books to be something which could be used to make yourself free of mind, cognitive liberty. That's pretty smart.
Well, it gets smarter, and the word liber is also where we get the place where books are stored at, where we go to learn, such as libraries. So liber is the root for the word library, and liberty meaning free.
It makes a lot of sense that the libraries are disappearing along with our freedom because we misunderstand this concept. So liberal actually means free, and then that would mean that the liberal education is about learning your way to freedom?
Not only does the word liberal mean free, but it means worthy of a free man, free from restraint, free in speech and action, free from narrow prejudice, open-minded, candid, free from bigotry, open to the reception of new ideas or proposals of reform. And what I'd like to do, Rich, is also include antonyms of the word liberal, which explain exactly what the opposite of a liberal is. And antonyms include uneducated, unintellectual, closed of heart, selfish, narrow, contracted, mean, small, fascist, racist, bigoted, homophobic, stingy, closed-minded, supportive of monarchies and slavery, against freedom of religious expression and speech, low in birth and mind, and therefore, since we're living in a free country with a constitution, it's anti-American to be against liberals. And not only that, but there's even a word for people who are against liberals, and that is known as liberticide, which is the destruction of civil liberties.
So it seems like we've been conditioned or programmed to purposely misunderstand the concept of the word liberal. And likewise, simultaneous to that, we've lost our liberties, our libraries, and our sense of freedom. And therein, the noble lie has empowered strategies like the Bush doctrine of preemption, using coercive military force to spread democracy. Lastly, while you have your OED out, Jan, could you summarize the definition of terrorism for me?
Now, the definition of terrorism means government by coercion or force.
So, the noble lie is a type of omission which takes away your free will, which is a type of force. So, the definition of terrorism being government by coercion of force used by a government who uses the noble lie, well, that gives us something to think about. Thanks, Jan. That goes a long way toward our understanding.
Thank you, Rich.
New Fallacy Be Gone Critical Thinking Spray.
Are you tired of soulless corporate advertising, shallow debates between puppet politicians, and the empty rhetoric of a ruling elite? Wishing that your opinions and the ideas of others actually made some kind of sense, instead of sounding like some bandwagon-hopping jingoistic nonsense? Looking to sound like your factual positions on the banking crisis are well thought out and articulate, rather than coming from an emotionally compromised bundle of tears and fears?
The new Fallacy Be Gone, the only critical thinking spray available in the world. Fallacy Be Gone destroys not 20, not 30, not even 40, but it obliterates these 42 fallacies. But the president said so! Appeal to God. Coming back. Please, what's $30 million? Just another it's like, appeal to God. Anyway, all the way, stand in trouble.
Powered by quadrimethyltryptamine, a DMT entheogen, Fallacy Be Gone gets rid of fallacies so fast you'll think you're reading a red herring while begging the question to create a false dilemma between a straw man and his bandwagon. So, get Fallacy Be Gone Critical Thinking Spray today and start making sense of tomorrow.
Nicholas Negroponte, welcome. Let's start with books. I really like books. I like the weight, the feel. I like to read them. I like to write them. You say the physical book is gone.
It will be in 5 years.
In 5 years?
Yes.
What makes you so confident?
Because the physical medium cannot be distributed to enough people. Think of the fact that
it's worked pretty well for 500 years.
But for a very limited number of people. When you go to Africa and let's say 500,000 people want books, you can't send the physical thing. When we ship with our laptop books to a village, we put 100 books on a laptop, but we also send 100 laptops in, each with 100 different books. So that village now has 10,000 books. This is an African village without electricity.
For those of you playing at home, you'll see that Nicholas Negroponte was educated at Le Rosey, the School of Kings.
The Greek city-states called polis were republics. Differences in wealth among their citizens were relatively small. There were no kings with the wealth to hire mercenary soldiers, so the citizens had to do their own fighting and to decide when to fight. As independent defenders of the common safety and the common interest, they demanded a role in the most important political decisions. In this way, for the first time, political life really was invented. Observe that the word political derives from the Greek word polis. Before that, no word was needed because there was no such thing. This political life came to be shared by a relatively large portion of the people, and participation in political life was highly valued by the Greeks. Such states, of course, did not need a bureaucracy, for there were no vast royal or state holdings that needed management, and not much economic surplus to support a bureaucratic class. There was no separate caste of priests, and there was very little concern, I don't mean no concern, but very little concern with life after death, which was universally important in other civilizations. In this varied, dynamic, secular, and remarkably free context, there arose for the first time a speculative natural philosophy based on observation and reason, the root of modern natural science and philosophy, free to investigate or to ignore divinity. What most sets the Greeks apart is their view of the world. Where other peoples have seen sameness and continuity, the Greeks and the heirs of their way of thinking have tended to notice disjunctions and to make distinctions. The Greek way of looking at things requires a change from the characteristic way of knowing things before the Greeks, that is to say, the use of faith, poetry, and intuition, and instead, increasingly the Greeks focused on a reliance on reason. Reason permits a continuing rational inquiry into the nature of reality. Unlike mystical insights, scientific theories cannot be arrived at by meditation alone, but require accurate observation of the world and reasoning of a kind that other human beings can criticize, analyze, modify, and correct. The adoption of this way of thinking was the beginning of the liberation and enthronement of reason, to whose searching examination the Greeks thereafter exposed everything they perceived, natural, human, and divine.
Hey man, do you have a couple minutes to run over some ideas, to collaborate?
Run.
I was just checking out this podcast, and I had a couple questions in relation to your soon-to-be-released film, Believers Beware, as it covers the concept of the New World Order, does it not?
Well, it does, in fact. I cover the evidence and testimony of those aristocrats whose dream is the New World Order. People like Plato, Alexander the Great, even H.G. Wells, who wrote a book called The New World Order.
Right on, dude. So I was just listening to this Yale podcast on the iTunes where you can listen to it for free, and this guy named Donald Kagan pops into my head. He's the guy teaching the class, and I think I've heard of him before. So I find this book on my shelf in front of me. It's been sitting here for months, and it's called Of Paradise and Power, America and Europe in the New World Order by this guy named Robert Kagan. And I come to find out that they're related, and I didn't know if you're familiar with the book or not.
No, I haven't heard of it.
All right, dude, well, check this out. There's this guy called Donald Kagan. He teaches at Yale, Aspen Institute. He's affiliated with, you got his degree from Cornell. He's got two kids. His kid, Frederick, is a character who also is affiliated with the Aspen Institute, the American Enterprise Institute. He likes to play war games. He teaches at West Point, and he teaches at Yale. Now, he has another brother named Robert, who's the author of this book. And these guys are all related with Council on Foreign Relations. Robert gets money from the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. He works for the Washington Post Company sometimes, writes for the New Republic. And these guys are all fans of a guy named Leo Strauss. And the Kagan family was one of the founding families associated with neoconservatives.
They are all originators of the Project for a New American Century, which has Straussian origins in its ideology. So that's pretty interesting. What is it about Straussian ideology, then, that you find interesting when we click on Leo Strauss's name?
And you're looking at the Brain Online, right? So if I just made these changes over here and added it, then you can see the notes under Leo Strauss, right?
Yeah. So under Leo Strauss, we've got him connected to the New School for Social Research. We've got him connected to Robert Maynard Hutchins and the Great Books of the Western World. And we've got him connected to something called the Noble Lie.
I was talking to Jan about this concept of the Noble Lie, but wouldn't the New School for Social Research also be under the Fabian Society? And it looks like they fund the Aspen Institute as well.
Yeah. The Aspen Institute, okay. You click on the Aspen Institute, you've got Donald and Frederick Kagan. You've got connections to the Rockefeller Brothers Trust, or Fund, and connections to the Ford Foundation, Carnegie Corporation, University of Chicago, and even the CIA.
Can you see what inspired the Aspen Institute?
Well, yeah, one of the main inspirations for the Aspen Institute looks like it's the Great Books of the Western World by Robert Maynard Hutchins. And if you click on that, it connects you to not only Leo Strauss, but a whole bunch of things to do with the liberal arts, the Trivium, Mortimer Adler, Mark Van Doren, Sir Walter Forbes Murdoch, and of course, the fact that critical thinking was removed from public schools.
So, do you think these guys are funding the Aspen Institute to help people get a liberal education?
No, it looks like they're funding ways to take advantage of people who are absent the liberal education through a doctrine called preemptive doctrine, really. It's where you strike at people who don't yet have the progressive capability to have these 7 liberal arts, and you instill it upon them ostensibly through the use of force, right? Through military strikes. And it's really just a rationalization for being able to go into a country, destroy it, rebuild it, and lend the country lots of money, which they can never repay.
So how do you think the noble lie plays into that whole neocon strategy? Does it have any connection?
Well, the idea of states sponsoring terrorism, which is never proven because it violates national security to give any details, sets up this structure where you can perpetually invade anyone and benefit from the costs incurred therein, and this strategy, this doctrine of preemption gives you the supposed moral rationalization. It acts like it's a philosophy, but it's really an ideology to be able to justify, quote unquote, these incursions on people's sovereignty, innocent countries' sovereignty.
So it seems like these characters got a hold of this liberal education in the 50s. They got this book, they got this set of books printed amongst themselves, and then immediately took that knowledge and tried to take over the world with it. Because they lead with the noble lie into the Bush strategy of military preemption so that we can spread democracy by force. It just seems like an oxymoron. Why wouldn't they just want to make everyone competent? Why would they seek to use it against people?
Probably because it being a noble lie, it's believed by the uneducated masses, right? It's a concept that's been around for thousands of years. It's been used by pretty much every military or dictator leader in history because it's the most efficient way to control people, not through physical means, but by having them believe in this noble lie, which then sets the foundation for all the other hoaxes that you're perpetrating. The fact that you'll find so many overlapping people in the Aspen Institute, the CFR, and employing the preemption doctrine, they were all members of Project for a New American Century, which famously called for what they call the New Pearl Harbor in order to justify invading the Middle East, right? And so one of the most foremost arguments that people make when they're talking about 9/11 being committed by someone other than terrorists from a cave in Afghanistan is that this attack provided the rationale, right, to then put into effect this cause of preemption. And without that event happening, they would never be able to kind of get their foot in the door where they could wedge this doctrine in and create rationalization after rationalization, where we're at now in 2010, where they're coming out with, they want to come out with torture warrants, right? A judge can write a warrant where you're allowed to be tortured under these certain conditions. So it's all based on this one event. So 9/11 is the 21st century's first noble lie.
Well, and it's like the noble lie is only powerful as long as we believe in these myths that they have created, right? Mm-hmm. So what's a good thing that average people could use to insulate themselves from these other people using that liberal education against all of us?
Well, the first thing they have to do is question the noble lie itself, but in order to do that effectively, they have to be using the same tools that are being used against them, that they're being taken advantage of because of the absence of these tools. So in order to level the playing field with the people who are oppressing us, we need to learn what their methodology is, and it is this 7 liberal arts or the trivium and quadrivium methodology. Primarily, the trivium gives you the ability to critically think and to analyze what exactly is the noble lie, what questions do I need to ask to unravel it and expose it, and then once you've got all that information sorted out, then you can take constructive action based on what you know as opposed to what you hope you think is true.
Well, I think far too many of us probably go through the days just guessing and using some random form of critical thinking to get through these days. And it seems like the advantage that these other people have with this system is just enough to always give them the edge. So where can we get a great set of books to learn about these things?
Well, there's a lot of people who've written about the trivium itself. If people can get a copy of the great books of the Western world, they'll be right on the same page in terms of knowing what inspired things like the Aspen Institute, but that's a pretty heavy read for a lot of people. So condensed versions, I know you can find, who is it? Dorothy Sayers has got a lot on the trivium. Jan Irving's Gnostic Media's got several podcasts on the trivium, the logical fallacies, and identifying, fallacious arguments. And of course, like Peace Revolution, Trivium Education. There's a lot of resources that are popping up, and you can learn these skills from any kind of angle whether people coming at it from the Christian angle or the New Age angle or whatever, the point is that identifying these core tools is going to give you more strength than any of these other belief systems.
So if the noble lie is a type of concealment or omission that takes away your free will, your right to make an informed choice, if governments are using the noble lie to spread democracy by force, what would that equate to?
Obviously, it's terrorism. It's just yet another word which they've taken to redefine as anyone who opposes government tyranny and force and coercion and violence. But it is in fact the use of force, coercion, and violence by the government in order to achieve its own ends, its own agendas. And that's what we see here. We see the authoring of the preemption doctrine by the very people who got in power within a year, and within another year they get their exact events on their wish list to put in place their preemption. So you have motive and opportunity, which in a criminal case would point these guys as the suspects, right? Way more than Osama bin Laden, who within the first month issued several notes saying, I'm not responsible, I would never do something like this, and then we never hear from him again legitimately.
So why would someone like you take up your Friday night doing all that has to be done on your end to make this Skype interview happen? Not interview, but this little dialogue.
Because it matters to me to get the truth out about what's going on, but more so to give people the capability to understand what's going on themselves, so to spark their curiosity, to spark their interest, so that they care more on a Friday night about maybe learning something that empowers their life rather than spending their money and their energy getting wasted. And I'm in Canada, the land of beer and hockey, but I just feel that I'm not going to force anyone to change their habits, but I'm going to show them, here's the habits I'm developing. If you think that's useful and benefits your life, then by all means emulate or change your habits to benefit your own life. It's different things work for different people, so all you can do is provide them an example and say, does this work for you? If not, keep on trucking. I'll keep on walking.
And how do you tell fact from fiction?
Well, I scream louder at fiction than I do at fact. That's how I tell it. I use the Trivium method to the best of my ability, right? You have to have discernment and you have to be able to do your due diligence, but once you've integrated that methodology of understanding grammar and logic and rhetoric, then it makes the information you take in with your five senses a lot easier to process, a lot easier to understand, and especially a lot easier to communicate back to other people. So, it's one of those things, just like learning, the basics of mathematics. It's one of those things that you need to learn, because without it, everything else you try and do is going to be lacking. And you don't really realize it until you've learned it, right? I thought I was smart until I learned the Trivium, and even though I know I'm not necessarily smart, at least I'm more conscious of my own incompetence.
Exactly. So what's coming up next episode?
Well, in the next episode of What You've Been Missing, we're going to look at the underground secret history of public education and just what that means for the common person who's been subjected to 12 years of that conditioning system and what it churns out and what the end result is. We look at the last 100 years of a society without proper critical thinking and just what that society looks like. It's a little bit frightening, but being aware of it and learning how to undo the damage is a really empowering thing. So people will definitely want to tune into the next episode of What You've Been Missing.
Yeah, it reminds me of that Mark Twain quote. He said, "The role of all great religious and educational institutions is to reveal information, but it's also to conceal information." So let's go out to the study and see what education's been concealed from us. That's what you've been missing.
Cool.
To seize this moment, we have to use technology to open up our democracy.
Good evening. Rap News is back this week on the back of yet another massive leaking, which lays bare and paints a clear picture of the actual dealings and reality of Operation Iraqi Freedom. It's been 7 years of that illegal invasion, which has claimed 1 million Iraqi people. The leaping toll of casualties and images from Abu Ghraib, rape, kidnappings, beatings, as hawks now have their eyes fixed on Iran. We analyze the man behind that original plan. And these very events, presenting our first guest, Donald Rumsfeld, Secretary of Defense. Mr. Rumsfeld? Hi there. Welcome down to the station. In light of this revelation, how do you feel now about the invasion?
This isn't new information, and it was liberation. Iraqis are now free to play soccer and PlayStation.
What about Abu Ghraib and the allegations, not just of humiliation, but of savage raping?
My actual statement is the military and the killing scene is at liberty to blow off a little steam. If you remember, the Iraqis had WMD.
Doesn't it trouble you that you failed to find any?
Well, steady, I never said Iraq had weapons, you know.
Yes, you did. You said that exact fact a second ago.
You know, there's things we know and things we don't know. And the knowns we know are known as known knowns. Things we don't know, which are known as no-nos among the knowns, and the no-nos we know go with the don't-knows.
I don't know. Intelligence was distorted and cynical, scorned and ridiculed, support for your war was minimal. Won't history judge you as a war criminal?
We'll write the books. They won't be at all critical. This interview's over. General,
get it, boys.
Hey, ow! Take him away. He's pitiful.
With pleasure. Now to shut rap news down forever.
All right, kill the live feeds, bring the live feeds. This is News World Order. I'm Bill O'Reilly, resuming entirely regular broadcasts of news for unbiased, fair, broad, and balanced views. Now, my first guest is a true American hero, Donald.
Bill, good to finally get on a real show.
So, how's the United States of Iraq in the last quarter?
Well, our crack forces, hand in hand with Blackwater, have forged ahead, creating an idyllic state that will hand over to whoever's left at the end.
The number of people in the Middle East opposed to democracy has swiftly decreased.
Yeah, by like 1 million at least since 2003.
That's 1 million more people who are now blissfully in peace. And WikiLeaks?
Bill, please, don't get me started on those frickin' cyber geeks.
What gets me is these hippies keep criticizing the military when the military keeps them living free from tyranny, terrorists, and nuclear bomb threats.
They seem to have a military-industrial complex, and this Julian Assange makes his foolish demands as the blood of Afghanis pools in his hands.
A lot of people are saying he's ruled by his glands, that he kidnapped schoolgirls and abused them in Iceland. But now, a word from our sponsor. We'll be back pretty fast with the former Secretary of Kickin' Ass.
Why see shades of grey? Why be alone? Try another Soma. Soma! That's good.
All right, we're back in the nose spine zone. News World Order live in your mobile home. So Bradley Manning.
Bradley Manning. Man, I'm glad we grabbed him. We're gonna black bag him, tag him, pack that homo away. Let's see him hack his way out of Guantanamo Bay.
Yeah, you know what you ought to do. Enhanced interrogation. Wait, there's a problem with my auto cue. What's that? Sorry, Bill, we have to interrupt. It just says you've been wanked. Stupid thing is stuck.
Wank, you say? I remember that from the NASA days.
Bill, we've been hacked, I'm afraid. Hacked? Fuck! We'll do it live! Fucking thing sucks! Do it live!
Wank. Only one man would use slang this way. It has to be Julian Assange.
Today. Gentlemen, hey? I couldn't help noticing you mentioned my name.
Assange, how the hell did you get in the frame?
A simple hack. You left the back door open again.
Well, hack off your hands, leave you rolling in pain.
I thought we controlled this whole station.
Our signal's being jammed from an undisclosed location.
You're telling me we can't even get that fag?
Well, he's somewhere north, south, east, or west of Baghdad.
Bill O'Reilly, for dangerous defiance of reason and betrayal of journalism, I now try you for treason. Shut it! You just think crap! You're dead! I think you'll find it's you that leaks crap and is dead.
What's happening to his head?
It's leaking every single bit of crap he's ever said.
We'll get you, Assange, and your little site too.
But 1,000 other sites will creep up behind you. I'm an avalanche. They didn't stand a chance against my battle plans. Robert, here, have your channel back. Apologies for the appalling violence. Julian, you look different. These days I can afford a stylist. Now the enemies of truth will cower before the avenging archangel and my brutal power. With the hammer of Thor, I will leap forth, crush the imposters.
I couldn't agree more.
Ah! What's going on here?
I think you know.
Is
that Julian Assange?
Yes, it is. Hello.
Look at his hair. Everyone knows it's white. This isn't Assange, it's some loser with lowlights. Now get out of here, you fake Assange. It's time for me to leak the true fate of Atlantis.
No, it's time to see who the heck this is.
Terrence Moonseed.
Gat, you pesky kids!
Well, I think it's time to end this session. It seems journalism's become a dangerous profession, risking ostracism, extradition to provide a clear picture of the world we live in. But without truth, history will certainly repeat the same wars in this time of universal deceit. Telling the truth has become a revolutionary act, so let us salute those who disclose the necessary facts.
This is Robert Hutchins, a vigorous social critic, a great educator, a man who has helped to revolutionize our thinking on the role of education in America. His ideas continue to provoke debate when he says that despite all our talk, American education is still going down the drain. When he says that our Bill of Rights is not adequate to protect the individual in our modern society. When he talks about the role of religion in a free society. We'll talk about those issues with Robert Hutchins in just a moment. Of course, one public institution that has come under fire from all sides recently is our education, our schools, particularly since Sputnik, as you pointed out. Now, from all this hue and cry about education, what do you think has been accomplished and will be accomplished as a result of this jolt to our complacency?
Nothing.
Nothing?
Nothing.
In spite of the slick magazines and the radio and television commentators and the newspaper editorials and all this, nothing. Why?
Because our complacency hasn't been jolted. It has been temporarily nudged.
Why hasn't it been more than temporarily nudged?
Well, you will recognize that the American people are, no matter what they say, are really indifferent to education. They can get temporarily excited about it. They want their children to have the diplomas and the degrees that will admit them to certain occupations. But the American people are not serious about education.
Well, I'd like to know why. You say the American people. Do you think that people from other countries are more serious about education? And what's wrong with us that we are not more serious?
Well, the reason other people are serious about education in other countries is that in other countries, education is the only road to success. In Russia, it's a road to very brilliant success, or may be the road to such success. In Europe, this is true, though perhaps to a less extent than it is in Russia. But education has nothing to do with success in the United States. A child of mine, I won't say a child of yours because such a thought is impossible, but a child of mine who was just above the level of moron could, I'm sure, acquire the diplomas and certificates that were necessary to enable him to get a job and make a comfortable living. So why should we get excited about education?
You've said, Mr. Hutchins, and I quote you here, by definition, a moron is a person who cannot think, and one of the benefits conferred upon us by the Industrial Revolution is that it has made it possible for morons to be successful. Would you care to enlarge on that?
Well, this is perfectly obvious. The object of industrialization is to reduce the amount of human effort and intelligence that is put into any single operation. Therefore, you finally get machines down to the point where they can be operated by 12-year-old children, or could be operated by them if the law would allow it. This means that it is possible for a moron to be successful. Now, the horror of this situation is not in the fact that morons can be successful, something which I heartily applaud. The horror of the situation is that people who are not morons are doing work that morons could do.
This is a 54-volume set of books titled The Great Books of the Western World. In Volume 1, The Great Conversation, Robert Maynard Hutchins has a few words to say about our sad state of education and overall competence. The summary being that we've all been programmed to be incompetent.
Chapter 10. A Letter to the Reader. We say that these books contain a liberal education and that everyone ought to try to get one. You say that either you've had one, that you are not bright enough to get one, or that you do not need one. You cannot have had one. If you're an American under the age of 90, you can have acquired in the educational system only the faintest glimmerings of the beginnings
of a liberal education.
Can pigeons read? This one gives every indication, because he's been taught to distinguish between two words and to behave appropriately. He's learned his different response to each sign by being rewarded with food. So the bird isn't acting independently. Its behavior is shaped by controlling its environment. The first task was to isolate an individual piece of behavior and see how that could be changed. Skinner did this by keeping individual pigeons at about 3/4 of their normal weight, so that the birds were always hungry, and food could be used as an automatic reward.
The main thing is what we call schedules of reinforcement. Reinforcement is what the layman calls reward, and you can schedule it so that a reward occurs every now and then when a pigeon does something. We usually use a response with a pigeon pecking a little disc, a little spot on the wall, and you can reinforce with food, but you don't reinforce every time. You're perhaps every 10th time, or perhaps only once every minute or something like that. There are a very large number of schedules. One of the schedules which is very effective with rats or pigeons is what we call the variable ratio schedule, and that is at the heart of all gambling devices, and it has the same effect. The pigeon can become a pathological gambler just as a person can. Now, the fact that we found that out with pigeons and could prove it by removing and changing the schedule makes it easy for us to interpret the case with the human subject. We don't say that the human subject gambles to punish himself, as the Freudians might say, or gambles because he feels excited when he does so. Nothing of the sort. People gamble because of the schedule of the reinforcement that follows, and this is true of all gambling systems. They all have variable ratios built into them. So what we've learned from the pigeon, it made it possible to interpret this vast field very effectively.
Well, I'm sure he's not talking about controlling us, unless...
While some scientists engineer shiny new consumer goods for an eager public, Harvard psychologist B.F. Skinner seeks nothing less than the engineering of human nature.
Uh-oh.
Skinner declares that with the right social engineering, we can create a new breed of human being. Skinner wants to do the rigorous science to prove that environment is everything. Change the environment, he argues, and you can change the individual. Or in Skinner's case, the pigeon. And Skinner believes that if it works for pigeons, why not people? In Skinner's mind, behavior is behavior, up and down the evolutionary scale, and it is all learned.
Hi, I was in an army experiment, and I'm not feeling so well. I think it might have been the drugs they had me on. I've been hallucinating. My head is just killing me. My joints are all achy, and Is this a hospital, or... I don't even know where I am.
Please proceed to the diagnostic area on the right, and have a healthy day.
Oh. Thanks.
Thank you!
So, food to pigeons is akin to money and people, and they use the shortage, whether it's pigeons with food or people with money, to control us, right?
I think I'm starting to see how TV, operant conditioning, the rat race, and corporate advertising are all tied together.
Here they come, yo. Here they come. Here they come. This or that. This or that. This or that.
Come on, who's the black sheep? What's the black sheep? Know not who I am or when I'm coming, so you sleep. Wasn't in my home or wasn't in your sphere. Knew not who I was, but listen here. The choice is yours. You can get with this, or you can get with that. You can get with this, or you can get with that. You can get with this, or you can get with that. I think you go with this, because this is kind of fat. Come on, where's the black sheep? Here's the...
Although few people have stopped to consider it, video game designers are increasingly turning to the realm of psychology to influence and manipulate those who are playing their games. For those who find such a concept far-fetched, there are two articles I'd like to direct them toward to begin putting this in perspective. First, we have here a particularly revealing article from Cracked.com from March 8th, 2010, under the headline, 5 Creepy Ways Video Games Are Trying to Get You Addicted. Reading from point number 5, Putting You in a Skinner Box, quote, "If you've ever been addicted to a game or known someone who was, this article, with a link, is really freaking disturbing. It's written by a games researcher at Microsoft on how to make video games that hook players, whether they like it or not. He has a doctorate in behavioral and brain sciences. Quote, each contingency is an arrangement of time, activity, and reward, and there are an infinite number of ways these elements can be combined to produce the pattern of activity you want from your players." Notice his article does not contain the words fun or enjoyment. That's not his field. Instead, it's the pattern of activity you want. His theories are based around the work of B.F. Skinner, who discovered you could control behavior by training subjects with a simple stimulus and reward. He invented the Skinner box, a cage containing a small animal that, for instance, presses a lever to get food pellets. Now, I'm not saying this guy at Microsoft sees gamers as a bunch of rats in a Skinner box. I'm just saying that he illustrates his theory of game design using pictures of rats in a Skinner box. This sort of thing caused games researcher Nick Yee to once call EverQuest a virtual Skinner box. So what's the problem? Gaming has changed. It used to be that once they sold us a $50 game, they didn't particularly care how long we played. The big thing was making sure we liked it enough to buy the next one. But the industry is moving towards subscription-based games like MMOs that need the subject to keep playing and paying until the sun goes supernova. Now, there's no way they can create enough exploration or story to keep you playing for thousands of hours, so they had to change the mechanics of the game so players would instead keep doing the same actions over and over and over, whether they liked it or not. So game developers turned to Skinner's techniques. This is a big source of controversy in the world of game design right now. Braid creator Jonathan Blow said Skinnerian game mechanics are a form of exploitation. It's not that these games can't be fun, but they're designed to keep gamers subscribing during the periods when it's not fun, locking them into a repetitive slog using Skinner's manipulative system of carefully scheduled rewards. Why would this work when the rewards are just digital objects that don't actually exist? End quote. Now, I would suggest interested viewers finish reading that article for themselves to find out the fascinating answer to that question, but right now let's jump over to that article by the Microsoft game designer that was referenced in that Cracked.com article. This article is on GamaSutra.com and is written by John Hobson. It is entitled simply enough, Behavioral Game Design, and at the very end of the article there is a summary for game designers giving helpful advice on how to make players play hard or how to make players play forever. Reading from that summary, to help drive home the ideas I've discussed, here are some simple formulas of what contingencies to use to achieve specific results. These are not the only ways to solve these problems, but they are simple, reliable, and very effective. How to make players play hard. Translated into the language we've been using, how do we make players maintain a high, consistent rate of activity? Looking at our 4 basic schedules, the answer is a variable ratio schedule, one where each response has a chance of producing a reward. Activity level is a function of how soon the participant expects a reward to occur. The more certain they are that something good or interesting will happen, the harder they'll play. When the player knows the reward is a long way off, such as when the player has just leveled and needs thousands of points before they can do it again, motivation is low, and so is player activity. How to make players play forever. The short answer is to make sure that there is always a reason for the player to be playing. The variable schedules I discussed produce a constant probability of reward, and thus the player always has a reason to do the next thing. What a game designer also wants from players is a lot of behavioral momentum, a tendency to keep doing what they're doing even during the parts where there isn't an immediate reward. One schedule that produces a lot of momentum is the avoidance schedule, where the player works to prevent bad things from happening. Even when there's nothing going on, the player can achieve something positive by postponing a negative consequence. Activity level is a function of how soon the participant expects a reward to occur. The more certain they are that something good or interesting will happen soon, the harder they'll play. How to make players quit. In other words, under what circumstances do players stop playing, and how can you avoid them? I've discussed 2 main conditions under which players stop playing. The first is pausing, where their motivation to do the next thing is low. Motivation is relative. The desire to play your game is always being measured against other activities. While they may have a high overall motivation to play your game, during play they're comparing their motivation to do the very next thing in the game to all the other next things they could be doing. If they've just gone up a level and know that they have an hour to play before anything interesting happens, their motivation will be low relative to all the other activities they could be doing. One way around this problem is to have multiple activities possible at any given time. This means that even if killing monsters becomes unrewarding, there are other activities within the game that can take up the slack. If monsters are unprofitable, exploration may be better. The player can take some time to improve their equipment or to practice a new tactic. Note that this is the same phenomenon that led to quitting before, a drop in motivation in the main activity, raising the motivation of lesser activities. In this case, the lesser activities are also part of the game, redirecting their attention within the game and maintaining a high level of play, end quote. In short, what these two articles are telling us is that the game designers are taking these games very seriously, and those who think that these techniques of manipulation are only being employed to keep people playing video games would be best served to contemplate how these very same behavioral manipulations can and are being incorporated into your daily lives. This is James Corbett of CorbettReport.com in Western Japan, reporting for What You've Been Missing.
Imagine when the game designers get a hold of all this garbage, the gas points and the shopping points and your coffee points and your airline points, all these points and points and points. Imagine when they're all designed and when they can be sensed and these things start to come together a little bit. Because sensors are what's happening now. That's what's changing things. And technology keeps getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, and there's going to be sensors everywhere detecting so many things in your life. And these things are going to be able to be used for gameplay. We're moving on a road towards disposable technology. If anyone here ever bought a Furby, right? The Furby costs like $20, $30. It has more technology in it than they used to put a man on the moon. And many people have now thrown out their Furbies because it's kind of dumb and they throw it out. It's disposable technology. We're, before too long, going to get to the point where every soda can, every cereal box is going to be able to have a CPU, a screen, and a camera on board it, and a Wi-Fi connector so that it can be connected to the internet. And what will that world be like? Well, I think it'll be like this. You'll get up in the morning to brush your teeth, and the toothbrush can sense that you're brushing your teeth, and so, hey, good job for you. 10 points for brushing your teeth. And it can measure how long, and you're supposed to brush them for 3 minutes, and you did. Good job, you brushed your teeth for 3 minutes. And so you get a bonus for that. And hey, you brushed your teeth every day this week, another bonus. And who cares? The toothpaste company, the toothbrush company, the more you brush, the more toothpaste you use, they have a vested financial interest.
God damn, are we stupid! And not getting any smarter. That's the scariest thing about life, is that dumb people are outbreeding smart people at a fucking staggering pace. And nobody ever even talks about it. We all kind of know it's happening. And the real problem is, most of us are dumb. We don't want to admit it. But really, how many of us are really smart? Look, I know I'm stupid. I know I'm stupid, but yet I'm smarter than almost everybody I meet. And the real problem with dumb people is they don't even know they're dumb. That's a part of being dumb. You're not aware. There should be a way to tell, like a home pregnancy test type thing. Some shit you take it home and you lick it and you go, oh, I'm a fucking idiot. Shit! What the fuck is this? It's broken. Give me another one. Dudes would never believe it. Idiots would be fucking boxes stacked to the ceiling. Liar! Cocksucker! No! The real problem is, most of us are idiots. We just like to think we're not idiots because we use a bunch of shit that smart people have figured out. But how many of us understand any of that shit? Think about the technological level that this world operates on. How many of us really understand that? What if everybody out there died and we had to take over the world? How well do you think we'd do? Yeah, terrific. We would do awesome. Yeah. Does anybody know how any of this shit works? Why is that loud? Any idea? I mean, been a comedian for 16 fucking years. I have no idea what's in there. I don't know, some loud shit? I don't know. What makes that bright? Bright shit? I don't know. Think about all the stuff you need to run your life. Computers and Palm Pilots and cell phones. How many of you know how to make any of that shit? I mean, if I left you alone in the woods with a hatchet, how long before you could send me an email? We are not smart. We buy shit from smart people. I don't have a camera on my phone because I'm smart. If you left me on an island for a fucking million years, I could never figure out how to put a camera in a phone. I don't even know what a camera is. I know I press a button and a picture shows up. What happens between me pressing that button and the picture showing up is anybody's fucking guess. There might be leprechauns and spray paints, fucking gremlins up the ass. All I know is megapixel. You gotta say that to get the good shit. I don't even know what a megapixel is. It's like a noise you make with your mouth. Megapixel. Oh, you're clever. You are clever.
You know, I wanted to mention this Cornell University study that we came across recently. A friend of mine, Richard Grove, who actually met the doctor in Connecticut who does the time travel stuff. But Cornell's study is called "Why People Fail to Recognize Their Own Incompetence," and it goes into exactly what you're saying. And you know, it's like in some of your skits, and I think you and I have talked about this in the past, but you know, you recognize how much you really don't know. And it's knowing that, it's knowing your own incompetence that enables you to better yourself, whereas incompetent people don't even recognize their incompetence.
Yeah, I talked about that in one of my jokes, one of my bits about dumb people outbreeding smart people, is that part of the problem with being dumb is you don't know you're dumb. You're not aware. I mean, dumb people have no idea. They're dumb.
Well, let me ask you this. Why do you make fun of dumb people, and then why do they laugh when you do?
I guess because they are dumb, or because they hope that you're not talking about them. You know, I mean, there's I don't know. There's a broad spectrum of human thinking. What doors have you opened? What paths have you gone down? And a lot of what's stupid, in quotes, is really just someone who hasn't gone anywhere in their mind. But the real problem is the average person doesn't go down a lot of roads. They don't have a lot of interesting people in their life. They don't have a lot of open-minded conversation. They don't have a shaman in their life. They don't have a person to look up to. For real, right? I mean, how important is that?
You know, I think what is missing, though, is a systematic method of critical thinking to derive certainty with any information coming in via the five senses. I think that is the main issue that most people are missing.
That is absolutely true. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, most people, that the idea is very alien. What you just said to them, wait a minute, you have a method for critical thinking? Like, what, you have an ethic? You have a whole series of steps that you take in your own mind? Yeah, I mean, for most people, it's a lack of people like you around them that are going to open these doors and have these conversations with them. This guy can influence your mind with his experiences, with his expression, and that'll set you down a path. And that's really what we're missing, man. What we're missing in life, in this culture, is shaman. We're missing someone who's been there, done that, and can guide you with no ego. So someone who's not just trying to do this for personal gain or for ego gratification, but someone whose purpose in this life is to guide people towards the spiritual, guide people towards the pure, towards the divine, guide people in the right way. There's no role like that in our society. There is no shaman in our culture.
If you give people the skills of critical thinking, give them the knowledge of grammar, logic, and rhetoric, then they can't be fooled once they come down, and any information that comes in via their five senses, they'll be more equipped to deal with that information as it's coming in. And then when they go out to describe their experience to others, obviously they'll be more effective in describing it as well. They got a clock going on the television screen exactly when they're going to start murdering people on the other side of the planet.
Yeah, fucking crazy. The internet was there. This shouldn't have been taking place. Like, we have the access to information now. Why are people willing to buy this ridiculous story? You know, that of course turned out to be bullshit. Of course there was no weapons of mass destruction. Of course, you know, billions and billions of dollars have been, you know, how do you say, misplaced, you know, in this venture. So we know for sure that many people have profited off this war. You know, the whole thing is very, very shocking.
I'd like to thank the fine people at Microsoft for creating something which provides a perfect background through which I can illustrate their goal, which is a Skinner box in everyone's hand, controlling every consumer remotely, hypnotizing the masses into their own destruction. Witchcraft, dark shamanism. You are being gamed. But it doesn't have to be this way.
Let's review how the noble lies used to perpetrate a ruse, how the cunning attempts have gone on unchecked. You might even note that the repetition of the myths are necessary to make you believe things which are not true and misdirect you from the facts.
In the heart of this great city, we saw tragedy arrive on a quiet morning. September the 11th. September the 11th. September the 11th.
September 11th. September 11th. September 11th. September 11th. September 11th. September 11th.
September 11th, September 11th.
September 11th, September 11th.
September 11th, September 11th. September 11th, September 11th.
September 11th, September 11th, September 11th. September 11th, September 11th, September 11th. September 11th, September 11th, 2001. War and danger. Continuing danger.
Hour of danger.
Very, very dangerous world.
A grave new threat.
Horrific acts of atrocities. Murderous regimes dedicating to killing us. Tyranny and terror. Slaughtered thousands.
Weapons of mass destruction.
Weapons of mass destruction. Weapons programs.
The deadliest of weapons.
Terrible weapons. Nuclear weapons.
Nuclear weapons.
Poison gas.
Torture chambers.
Mass graves.
Deadly technologies.
Radical ideology of hate.
Terror of threats.
Terror.
Terror.
Terror. War on terrorism.
War against terrorism.
Global war on terror.
Global terrorism. 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 Global terrorism.
Terrorism.
Terrorism. Terrorism. Terrorism. Terrorism. Terrorism. Terrorism. Terrorism. Terrorism. The evil terrorist.
Our story begins, as these stories often do, with a young up-and-coming politician. He's a deeply religious man and a member of the Conservative Party. He's completely single-minded and has no regard for the political process. The more power he attains, the more obvious his zealotry and the more aggressive his supporters become. But if your ultimate goal is power, how best to use such a weapon? It's at this point in our story that along comes a spider. He is a man seemingly without a conscience, for whom the ends always justify the means, and it is he who suggests that their target should not be an enemy of the country, but rather the country itself. 3 targets are chosen to maximize the effect of the attack. Fueled by the media, fear and panic spread quickly, fracturing and dividing the country until at last the true goal comes into view. Eventually, his party launches a special project in the name of national security. At first, it's believed to be a search for biological weapons, and it's pursued without regard to its cost. However, the true goal of this project is power, complete and total hegemonic domination.
What we need right now is a clear message to the people of this country. This message must be read in every newspaper, heard on every radio, seen on every television. This message must resound throughout the entire interlink. I want this country to realize that we stand on the edge of oblivion. I want every man, woman, and child to understand how close we are to chaos. I want everyone to remember why they need us.
Dedicating to killing us.
The truth is There is something terribly wrong with this country, isn't there?
Cruelty and injustice, intolerance and oppression. And where once you had the freedom to object, to think and speak as you saw fit, you now have censors and systems of surveillance coercing your conformity and soliciting your submission.
We need cameras.
How did this happen? Who's to blame? Well, certainly there are those who are more responsible than others, and they will be held accountable. But again, truth be told, if you're looking for the guilty, you need only look into a mirror. I know why you did it. I know you were afraid. Who wouldn't be? War, terror, disease. There were a myriad of problems which conspired to corrupt your reason and rob you of your common sense. Fear got the best of you. Fairness, just order, and freedom are more than words. And all he demanded in the house was perspective. So if you've seen nothing, if the crimes of this government remain unknown to you, then I would suggest that you allow the 5th of November to pass unmarked. But if you see what I see, if you feel as I feel, and if you would seek as I seek, then I ask you to stand beside me, and together we shall give them a 5th of November that shall never, ever be forgotten.
Now, what would someone like Alan Moore, the artist who created V for Vendetta, think about the use of the noble lie, specifically on TV?
I believe that all culture must have arisen from cult. Originally, all of the facets of our culture, whether they be in the arts or the sciences, were the province of the shaman. The fact that in present times this magical power has degenerated to the level of cheap entertainment and manipulation is, I think, a tragedy. At the moment, the people who are using shamanism and magic to shape our culture are advertisers. Rather than trying to wake people up, their shamanism is used as an opiate to tranquilize people, to make people more manipulable. Their magic box of television, and by their magic words, their jingles, can cause everybody in the country to be thinking the same words and have the same banal thoughts all at exactly the same moment.
Hello. Greetings and salutations. Excuse me for cutting into your signal, Richard, but I was wondering if I could get in on some of this what you've been missing action.
Hey everybody, it's Christopher Walk.
Hold up, Kemosabe. Let's not use my real name. There's a reason why I'm incognito.
You're not gonna ask a man in the mask who the fuck he is. I'll tell you, there's one film I made where I've got a remote control to control your universe.
People probably know me from my day job at the movies, but I'm not dropping any hints to you silly bimbos. Please, Richard, refer to me as my alter ego identity, V for Veritas.
So what's with the costume?
Well, I recently learned that Hollywood likes to fuck you at the drive-thru. Specifically, they've been using the cinematic arts to dumb down the population and to obliterate a curiosity, like we're a bunch of cats or something. Discovering that I'd been duped, I've thus donned this persona to reflect my fight against deception.
So you're in the process of becoming your own superhero. What started this line of thinking?
You're precisely correct, Richard. You see, I was reading this academic study from Cornell University. Don't get up, I do like to read a book from time to time. Basically, the Cornell study lays out the observation that incompetent people are blind to their own freaking incompetence. So the dummies think that they're smart because they're too dumb to know they're a bunch of morons.
And what did you learn from the experience?
I found out that I was a fucking moron. What I mean to say is that I discovered that as a result of being undermined by public education, television, and advertising, that I was in fact intellectually incompetent because I had no system of critically thinking. I was a fool to my own ignorance. Let me tell you a fact, Jack. Nobody makes a fool out of me, except of course, me.
So you discovered you were being fooled, and you decided to learn how to make yourself foolproof?
Exactamundo, my friend. You don't miss a fact, Grove. You see, I decided that it was more logical, rational, and reasonable to lead a search for truth. Veritas, instead of this vendetta business, baby.
Ah, veritas being the Latin word for truth. V, thank you so much for providing us with a bit of comic relief.
Rich Grove, it's been a slice. Tell your audience to say whoa to the status quo, and you all keep on trucking. I'll keep on walking. Peace.
This last clip was sent to me by longtime viewer Travis Doss via email. Quote, Yo, Grove, you need to quit with the negativity and make some inspirational documentaries like the one attached. These guys are heroes. Well, Travis, thank you for sending a little sarcasm to my inbox, and to show you what I mean, I've souped up the video to make these heroes look a little more super.
It is in this network's logo and the shield of the National Football League, the colors red, white, and blue, and that is not by mistake. Nothing is more patriotic than a big-time National Football League game and the national anthem playing before it with a flyover overhead.
Come, you masters of war, you that built the big guns, you that built the death planes, you that built all of the bombs, you that hide behind walls, you that hide behind desks. I just want you to know I can see behind your masks. You that never done nothing but built to destroy. You play with my world like it's your little toy. You put a gun in my hand, and you hide from my eyes, and you turn and run when the fast bullets fly. Just like Judas of old, you lie and deceive. A world war could be won. You want me to believe, but I see through your eyes, and I see through your brain. I see through the water that runs down my drain. You that fastened all the triggers for the others to fire. Then you set back and what? As the death count grows high.
Light them all up. Come on, fire.
While the young people burn, throws out of their bodies is buried in the mud. That from the worst fear.
Alright, we just engaged all 8 individuals. Yeah, we got a few emerged. We're still firing. Roger. Got him. I'm sorry, what was I done? Bypass? God damn it, Kyle. Sorry. I hit him, I think. Alright, you're clear. I'm just trying to find targets again.
Master 6, this is Bushmaster 2-6. With the blood that runs in your veins.
This episode is presented commercial-free and free to all, thanks to those who support our work published on TragedyandHope.com. I'd like to thank the subscribers of the Tragedy and Hope online community, and I'd like to express my thanks and gratitude to Jan Irvin, James Corbett, and Paul Verge for making this show a lot more interesting than just seeing me sit here. And if you're left wanting more, I also would like to direct you to the notes for this episode, where you can see all the clips that we used in their entirety, as well as references, homework, and a place where you can participate. So click the invitation link to the Tragedy and Hope online community and support our work so we can continue to produce commercial-free art with integrity. Thank you for tuning in and not dropping out. And now here's the band Gomez to play us out. What? What does that mean, play us out? I can't read it. There's no fucking words on the prompter. I can't read it. Oh, to end the show? Well, why don't you just say it? Why don't I say it? Fuck it. I'll do it live. This thing sucks.
But this isn't live, and you're the one writing the script.
Here's a look behind the scenes to see some tools we use to get her done. Little technology that makes what you've been missing possible. Here's a homemade teleprompter, which I use to feed words to myself. We use this earbud so there's no echo when recording Skype conversations. And finally, we use the brain, which allows me to organize data in formation, so we can all learn to understand. Exploration designed to stimulate and you and your potential resurrected. Drop words on there. Clever teleprompter. You know exactly which words to delete.
I do a little voodoo on the side in the entertainment industry.
You don't have to go back up that far, just a little bit, but it gives me like a line with one word, the word two, and then it leaves out a word and it gives you another line. These are the issues when you make a pilot. First time.
The word fallacy derives from Latin fallare, which means to deceive, and it's funny, I do interviews all the time. I get in front of a camera, I'm all like,
See, it's all about learning how to spot them when media is trying to change what you're thinking and change your behavior and change your buying patterns to use. Okay, let me do it over again. Let me redo it.
I can't read it. There's no fucking words on the prompter. I can't read it. Oh, to end the show? Well, why don't you just say it? Why don't I say it? Fuck it. I'll do it live. This thing sucks.
But this isn't live, and you're the one writing the script, see?
I'm just glad I get to go upstairs and start editing.
I almost forgot I had to say something.
Did you read your own lines at the end?
Backwards.
Now I just have to get some footage of the script again. It's just there.
What's wrong about you, Juha?
Explain that.
Something's opened this door. You're not the one, Juha.
I'm not the one?
No.
I'm not the one who cuts your medication? I'm not the one to say if you're competent for a hearing, a chance of getting out of here? I'm the one, Ethan.
Oh, yeah?
I'm the one.
One in control, huh?
Yes.
Who's in control?
is in control? Huh? Are you? Am I? The guards outside? The warden in his office? Yeah? Who's in control? Testing. 1, 2, 3, 4. Dr. Ethan Powell interviewing Dr. Theo Corder. Now, this will be a very simple test. Pass or fail, life or death. Ready, Jean? Now, you write on this paper what I have taken from you. What have you lost? Write it! Write it! Wrong! Never had control. You only thought you had it. An illusion, tapis bourgeois. And what do you control? For sure, huh? The volume on your stereo, the air conditioning in your car? What else? What else? All right. Another chance. You were nervous. Too much pressure. Try again. What have you lost? What did I take? Write it. Write it! You're a fool, sure. You think you were free? Where were you going at 2 o'clock today? Into the gym, right? In the morning, your wake-up call. In the middle of the night, when you wake up sweating with your heart pounding. What is it that has you all tied up as you are? Tied up in little knots. Is it ambition? Yeah. You're no mystery to me, boy. I used to be you. Okay, one last chance. You think I won't do it? That's one psychiatrist less to the world. I'm already deep in the pit, so what can they do to me? Last try. Get it right. What have you lost? What did I take from you? Write it. Congratulations. You're a student after all. And you've lost nothing but your illusions and a little bit of skin.